Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. Donald Trump's 80th birthday is coming up in just 2 weeks, and as is his style, he's been corruptly lavishing himself with presents all year in preparation. But today, 3 separate federal judges started raining on his parade, a quick succession of court decisions over the course of just a few hours rebuking Trump on some of his seemingly highest priorities in office. I mean, these are the things that keep him up at night. These are the things he thinks about, that he plots about, that he talks about to the press and anyone who's listening. There is clear evidence of the growing backlash to his profiteering off of his petition. Like when he unilaterally put his name above John F. Kennedy's on the Kennedy Center. Not, profit per se, but let's just say self-aggrandizement. A federal judge today ordered Trump's name permanently removed from the building, saying, quote, and this is true, Congress gave the Kennedy Center its name and only Congress can change it. That was just the beginning of Trump's very bad day. The next shoe to drop was over his planned $1.8 billion slush fund to pay the people who helped him try to overthrow an election the last time he lost, and we should say, essentially anyone else that he wants to. The plan is now falling apart. A federal judge in Virginia put the brakes on that slush fund today, halting it as multiple lawsuits against Trump's DOJ work through their way through the courts. Remember, Trump's DOJ proposed this fund at a settlement to Trump's $10 billion lawsuit against the IRS that Donald Trump controls. And today, the federal judge in Florida, who heard the lawsuit, right, when Trump filed the lawsuit against the IRS, she said she is reopening that lawsuit to investigate grievous allegations that the settlement was, quote, premised on deception and made the court the victim of a fraud. That was a response to a motion by 35 former federal judges saying the Trump administration might have defrauded the court with its settlement. The settlement seems like a product of collusion, not a good faith process between two parties in a lawsuit who are, crucially, adversarial to each other in a controversy, as the Constitution describes. In fact, one of the signatories, one of the retired federal judges who signed onto that brief, explained on our show just last night how there could have been a fraud on the court.
This could only be paid over if there was litigation, if there had been a claim. And so, therefore, they went to court to make a claim. The problem is that the claim was really, as we said in our papers, a collusion, was a fraud on the court, that the claim was really not a real claim because it was Donald Trump bargaining with himself, as you said before, the snake bargaining with himself. So the motion was to reopen the case. Not that we're saying that it is a fraud or not fraud. We're saying there's enough here that the judge should investigate, should be opened to see what's going on.
Now, I'll be honest with you, when we had Nancy Gertner, who you just saw there on the show last night, who's been a frequent guest and who I always love hearing from, when we had her on the show saying this, again, I don't know the law well enough, it seemed a bit of a long shot, like to go in and be like, wait a second, wait, not so fast. But guess what? Not such a long shot. That judge that received the filing is now giving the government until June 12th. They have to file something explaining how the slush fund plan is legitimate. They actually have to reply and say, no, we weren't colluding, we were adversarial, as hard as a case that might be to make, or the whole thing might be scuttled entirely. So that's 3 huge rulings just today, just in a few hours this afternoon into the evening, challenging some of Trump's most grossly corrupt acts. Then, just before he got on air, another federal judge ruled that he could not dismiss the indictments of Oath Keepers leader Stewart Rhodes and fellow supporters who plotted the attack on the Capitol on January 6th because the Justice Department hasn't offered any facts or evidence to justify it, despite the fact that they are trying to rescind those. Just more evidence of Trump's waning power and influence, and also of the just sheer lawlessness of his rampage through the nation that federal judges have been trying to stop. This is even as he's taking the nation's birthday party and turning it into his own. I mean, it's the 250th birthday of the country. Trump has sort of appropriated the whole thing as a Donald Trump birthday party. He's throwing himself a USC party. There it is, in front of the White House, a live televised cage fight that's happening on the White House lawn on Trump's 80th birthday in 2 weeks, by the way. And that pairs wonderfully with another one of Trump's gifts to himself. And again, he's been making lots of these. He's not someone who likes to deny himself much. A big bunch of stock in, yes, you guessed it, UFC's parent company. between $15,000 and $50,000 worth in late March, according to disclosures first reviewed by HuffPost. The White House told MS Now there are no conflicts of interest. Great. No, there's just a stock purchase and then a giant UFC event on the White House lawn that he's been promoting for months. What could possibly be a conflict of interest about that, right? Donald Trump feels entitled to lots of gifts all the time now, even when it's not his birthday. In fact, every day is kind of his birthday. I think that's the way he views it. This increasingly brazen and ham-handed corruption is also, I think, getting harder to sustain as gas prices still hover above $4 a gallon and a vast majority of the country says the economy's awful and his political strength collapses. That's especially with regards to the seditionist slush fund, which might be the single most repellent and audacious idea he's come up with yet. I mean, members of both parties have now introduced bills to block it. One congressman is pushing to subpoena the Trump officials who were involved in putting the plan for that fund together. That congressman is Jamie Raskin, Democrat of Maryland. He's a ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, and he joins me now. Congressman, I think you and I would both agree that federal district court judges, that's the lowest level in the federal judiciary that has 3 levels, district, appellate, Supreme Court, across ideological lines, across the party that nominated them, have really consistently kind of just said up is up and down is down, you know, black is black and white is white when it comes to Trump. And today we have another example with respect to the slush fund. So first, let me just start with your understanding of the significance of both of these rulings. 1, to just stop it, and 2, down in Florida, to reopen the case.
It's monumental. And the constitutional philosophy that's been advanced by tens of millions of Americans across the country of no kings, I think is also being taken up by the federal judiciary. These people are saying no kings. We're actually going to enforce the law as it is. So it's a remarkable day for the rule of law in America as the judges peel back the various layers of the onion and reveal nothing but a fraud at the heart of it. And that fraud is obviously propounded by Donald Trump, but Attorney General Todd Blanche is right in the thick of it. I mean, they filed a motion to dismiss on July 23rd of 2025 in a case not only exactly on point legally, but on exactly the same point factually. It related to the same leak that Trump was concerned about. This is the one that sent Charles Littlejohn to jail for leaking information about Trump's taxes. And the DOJ, under Todd Blanche and under Pam Bondi, sent in a motion to dismiss, which succeeded, saying that you can't recover against the government for the misdeeds of a private government contractor. They knew it. They won on that point, and then they turned around in this case, and they agreed with Donald Trump that he should get $10 billion.
Yes, right.
Yeah. So now they're all going back and saying it was a fraud on the court from the beginning. There was collusion between the two sides. They weren't owed $1, much less $10 billion. So the settlement, the so-called settlement, was completely fraudulent. It was an attempt to set up this $1.776 billion political slush fund for their friends, and then also an attempt to wipe the slate clean for any tax fraud, tax crimes, or other federal crimes or federal civil violations that were undertaken by Trump, his family, or his businesses, which, of course, had nothing to do with the original matter of the leak in the first place. So they tried to sneak into this whole thing, this wipeout of liability, a super pardon by the attorney general for the president, his family, and his businesses. And now suddenly it's clear the emperor's got no clothes. This was a fraud on the court that they're trying to turn into a fraud against the country.